Tuesday night, July 26th, which means it is time for the buzz. You've got the Commish, you've got Cyclop, you've got 2020, and we are here on the eve of many a training camp to talk to everybody about fantasy football. The Fantasy Football Buzz podcast is live on the air. Guys, how you doing tonight?
I'm feeling great.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're 1.5 weeks until a game. Now it is the Hall of Fame. It is the Hall of Fame game. So we don't get too excited, but things are happening. The pads are on, and they're getting ready.
Cyclops and I are a week and a day away from going to Dolphins training camp live with my son. So that's pretty exciting. And
I'll be there too. I know Jonah got tickets for every training camp available.
Nice.
So I'm not sure I'll be at every one, but he will be. We could even broadcast live from training camp. That would be cool. We can figure something out.
We could.
So maybe do that. But tonight we are going to focus on the NFC, guys. We're going to talk about sleepers. We're going to talk about the busts. We're going to talk about the must-haves. In the NFC, 2 weeks ago we did the AFC. Now it's time for the NFC. And of course, we are here to answer any and all of your fantasy football questions. Drafts are starting to happen. People are getting excited, and that's what we're here for. If you have any questions, you can give us a call, 772-800-BUZZ or 2899, or you can always comment Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live now, and we will get to your questions and get those answers right out to you. Before we get to the starters, before we get to the buzz, I'm ahead of myself, the sleepers, the busts, and the must-haves. Keith, why don't you explain what a sleeper is, what a bust is, in context to what we're doing here?
Absolutely. So a sleeper is someone that I would say, based on either their draft position and or how they performed last year, someone that you're going to take in the draft in those mid or later rounds that's going to perform ahead of where you drafted them and where they were expected to perform. Those under the radar guys, sometimes they're on the radar guys, just outperforming where they're drafted and what their expectations are. Bust is the exact opposite. Guys that can't coming in with a lot of hype, a lot of expectations, very often early to mid-round draft picks, and whether it's injury, game scheming, or just underperforming, they are not performing at the draft capital that you invested to them. And the must-haves, these are the guys that we just love. People that we draft and just do what they're goddamn supposed to do. Right. RB1, playing like an RB1. A wide receiver one, playing like a wide receiver one. It's the guys you can count on. You gotta have them on your team because you know you're gonna get what you expect. If only I'm not gonna say that. Let's say only women were like that, but that's a different show. But yes, that's your must, and that's your sleeper.
All right. Well, that sounds good. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with our NFC East or least, right? I mean, wasn't there some stat the last time that anybody in the NFC East has won a playoff game, or when was that every year it's a different team that's winning the NFC East? By the way, Javi has already commented. He's saying that A.J. Dillon is going to take over, and that's his sleeper for the Packers. And which one of you has the Packers? I know we haven't gotten to the Packers yet, and I'm not sure if whichever one of you two is going to be talking about the Packers. If you have A.J. Dillon,
no.
I'm curious, Javi, are you suggesting that Aaron Jones is going to lose his starting position? Or are you suggesting that you're looking at end of games, A.J. Dillon, third down, he's going to get the ball passed to him? You know, I'm curious what you feel here. It says will take over.
I'm thinking
Aaron Jones. I mean, they put a lot of money in Aaron Jones, right? I mean, are they really going to? You know what? Let's save that when we get to Green Bay.
Yeah.
Right.
By the way, you do have the Packers, so I hope you did them.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Commish or Cyclop?
No, Brad, Cyclop. You have Green Bay. Yeah.
It's okay. We'll get to it. It's fine.
We'll make it work.
We can do it all together, and we can even get Javi involved if you want to talk about who the sleepers, busts, and must-haves are for the Green Bay Packers. I have no problem with that. But in the meantime, we're going to start with how about them Cowboys?
You know, it's so funny. You talk about the NFC East, and this is a team every year that you have such high aspirations for. They look, you know, in last year their defense came on, but let's talk about their bust, their must, and their sleepers. So for me, the must-have on this team is CeeDee Lamb. He's a guy that looked good when Amari Cooper and Cedric Wilson were there taking grabs away from him. Now he comes back, and this guy is the marquee. I loved his numbers last year. First of all, he's being drafted. His ADP is showing as number 18. His best is at 12, worst third, but his average ADP is 19. Not a bad spot there. This guy last year had almost 80 receptions. He missed a game, right? So, you know, on 80 receptions, you got to figure he'd be more like 87, 88, 1,100 yards and 6 tugs. And in his first year as a rookie, he wasn't too far off, 74 grabs, almost 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. But again, you got Amari Cooper gone, Cedric Wilson gone. You still have Gallup there. I love CeeDee Lamb as a must-have. I think he's going to absolutely perform on that team.
Can I ask you a question? Right now, his ADP has him going after Jefferson and Kupp and Chase and Stephon Diggs and Devontae Adams. Do you think that that's correct? Do you think CD is in the right spot, or should he be above some of those people?
I think everything there sounded right to me, with the exception of Devontae Adams. And there's, again, nothing about his talent, but he's
it's a mystery what's going to happen, right?
Thank you. CeeDee Lamb is a known quantity that should only get better. Where Devontae Adams is, again, Randy Moss had Jamarcus Russell throwing the ball. It was very different. Derek Carr can throw. He's a good quarterback. But you got Waller there. You got Hunter Renfrow there. I would take CeeDee Lamb in a heartbeat.
The question with CeeDee Lamb is he going to start getting more double coverages because there's less action from the other receivers, and it's going to hurt his value a bit?
Doesn't matter. Look at Devontae Adams. He was the only guy there. They had Lazard and MVS. One of them was always hurt. There was nobody else there. Randall Cobb is older than me. So, I mean, like, it doesn't matter. Good receivers are good receivers.
We'll see.
He probably was already being double covered as opposed to Amari Cooper. He was the bigger threat last year. I don't think anything's going to change. The only difference is that you might have a nickel on their number 3 receiver. But other than that, you know, maybe there's going to be a safety on top in a lot of situations with CeeDee Lamb, but it's not going to stop them. And if that does happen, what you're going to see is plenty of Ezekiel Elliott / Tony Pollard. But I don't want to jump ahead. Keith, what's going on? We got your must-have is CeeDee Lamb. Who's the sleeper there in Dallas?
I was going to go to my bust next, but my sleeper is actually Michael Gallup, because, listen, there was a lot of balls to go around between, I didn't just say that, between Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. And Michael Gallup, actually, and what I love is ADP is 117, right?
You know why?
Well,
he's hurt.
Yeah, but it doesn't look that bad. From what I understand, he's not going to miss much time. Isn't that right? I don't think he's going to miss much time. I mean,
I'll look into it. But
we'll see if he ends up on the PUP.
Yeah, well, that is a good aspect. I mean, that's a changer to me. Other than that, it was a little hard for me to find a sleeper. I don't think Dalton Schultz is a sleeper anymore. This guy, you know, at points last year was one of the top 5 tight ends. So, I mean, you could say that otherwise, but to me, it would be Gallup based on what his ADP is. Yes, it obviously depends if he's hurt, and he only played 9 games last year. But, you know, before that, the guy had 843 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1,100 yards the year before that, 6 touchdowns. You know, his issue has always been his frailty. He did have 2 out of the last 4 seasons, full seasons. But, again, they only played 9 games last year. So if this guy's healthy, if he doesn't end up on the pup, and it only looks like he might miss a game or 2, I like him to be definitely not the 1B there. There is a wide receiver 1 in Lamb, but this guy's a very nice, complimentary second receiver that can give you 80 grabs, maybe 1,000 yards, 5, 6, 7 touchdowns based on where he's being drafted.
Right.
And unless you guys want to comment on that, my bust is, you actually said his name just a minute ago, but this is based on where he's being drafted and just what I'm seeing year over year, and that's Zeke Elliott. And the biggest reason why I have him as a bust is I just believe his timeshare with Tony Pollard is just going to continue to increase. I mean, he's coming in right now from an ADP standpoint of where is it drafted? He has his outlook for RB. He's being billed as an RB6 right now, which I just think is way too high. And I don't love his ADP for some reason. It's not showing here. But last year, he just eclipsed 1,000 yards, and he wasn't hurt. That's in a full 17-game season.
No, he still was battling that shoulder injury.
He was, but he didn't miss any time. He was definitely. He just doesn't. He doesn't, to me, have the same explosiveness that he used to have. He did average 4.2 yards a carry. He did one of the things that really saved him was his 10 touchdowns, but he barely got over 1,000 yards in that. And he didn't grab as many balls as I thought he would. He did all right, but not quite as many. No, I'm not showing it here. I had
Pollard was getting
Pollard,
he was getting such a good timeshare.
And that's my biggest fear is Pollard looked so much more explosive than Zeke last year, and it could have been because of his injury. It's very possible. I just feel he's so early in his career, he was overused so much that I think you're going to see a heavy timeshare. Pollard coming in on more of those passing downs, and I just see for where he's being drafted. I would label Zeke a bust.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Zeke started off real hot, and then got injured a bit, and then it was much more of a timeshare.
But it looked good,
yeah.
And that's my fear with Zeke based on where he's being drafted.
All right. I mean, look, a lot of people have him being drafted. Let me see what I have here. I have him as number 37, RB 18. So yeah. I think that's actually a little low. I mean, they have Cam Akers ahead of him, Travis Etienne. I'll take those. I'll take Zeke all day over those guys. But it should be interesting, and we'll see. Zeke is still Zeke, and yeah, there were times where the eye test, right? Tony Pollard just looks so much better,
right? Yeah,
Elliott. So you can't deny that. It's just whether or not what they're gonna do to this guy who's, clearly got the talent, and he's in the end of his contract year. So it should be very interesting.
Yeah, you're right. He is an overall 32 RB17, which is fair. You know what? I got to be honest with you. It was hard to find a bust on this team based on where people are drafted. It really was. Dak, I think, is going to be great. He's going to be what you expect. I think so are Lamb and Gallup. I just couldn't find a bust. So Zeke was the closest thing I really think we have for a bust on this team.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's jump. Since we're going to stay in the NFC East, let's jump to the Giants. Brad, what do you got with the Giants?
Well, the Giants have been a head case for the past several years between injuries and coaching and everything else. But here's, I think, what will happen this year. So as far as a sleeper, and I know probably laugh, but Daniel Jones. Okay, this guy was ended up number 11 quarterback last year in the NFL. Now, his receivers have been a mess, but there's a couple things here. They have the easiest schedule in the NFL for quarterbacks, which puts him already a little bit of a step up. If his wide receivers can stay healthy, they've also upgraded their offensive line. They went out and got offensive linemen to protect him. He has the parts around him. He also, it just needs to click for him. It is his fourth year, I think. They have Tony. They have Shepard. They have Galladay. Galladay. They
if it's going to happen, parts. This is the year, right?
Right. So he's my sleeper.
This is a deep sleeper. Like, he's coming out of Ambien for this to happen, by the way.
He ended up number 11 quarterback last year. He's right now ranked number 17 quarterback taken in fantasy drafts. So, if you get him late, you get him last couple rounds of your draft, you never know. I mean, they're going to have to
Yeah,
throw the
I
ball.
compare this.
So.
I compare this in a way to Tua, where you don't really know what you have, right? And because
Right.
they didn't give him the tools, they've now got Brian Dable as the coach with the Giants. Look, the Giants didn't have a coach. The Giants didn't have a system. They didn't have an offensive line. They didn't have real receivers. You know,
Right.
everything's starting to come together now. Saquon Barkley is possibly healthy. So I
For a
agree
few
with
games.
you. I absolutely agree with you.
All right, so we'll get easily a must-have, and I mean I'm going with Kenny Galladay here. I know
As a must-have.
As a must-have.
He had an awful year last year, but he was targeted 13 times in the red zone with 0 touchdowns. That's amazing. That cannot keep pace.
You mean amazingly bad?
Amazingly. Right. Well, it's amazing that he had that many targets with no touchdowns down there. Yeah. So, but I mean, we know the guy has talent. If they can just get, if they can get Jones more time and he can get cleaner looks at Galladay, he should. And hopefully he'll be healthy, right? Because he wasn't really healthy last year either. So we'll see. I think he'll rebound big this year. I think he's probably, if he can stay healthy and if all those things fall in place, 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns, which would be a really good year. Great year. So we'll see. My bust is Saquon Barkley. I know he's back healthy. I know he played, through the year last year, kind of on and off. People are going to be taking him in that probably early, mid second round, and into the I don't think I'll go to the third round. He'll probably or early third round, but I think injuries and I just don't trust him. I don't trust him to have that same breakaway speed that he had, and I think he's going to be a bust.
Well, let me, if you don't mind, if you don't mind me telling you why you're wrong, and
Go ahead.
And I'm ready to put $1 on this. I really believe that Barkley is in a position the same way that Danny Dimes is in that position.
Okay.
Right, where he didn't have the offensive line. It was the worst offensive line in football. They've now replaced 4 of the 5 starters in New York. They drafted Evan Neal, number 7 overall. They got Izudu in the 3rd round. They also signed Glowinski and Feliciano. I mean, they really have revamped that line.
Agreed.
And the ACL, I mean, he's fine with the ACL. And look what Dalvin Cook, Dalvin Cook tore his ACL in his rookie year and has come back with a vengeance. The injuries, by the way, that Dalvin Cook has had have nothing to do with the ACL. And we know that was in 2020. So he's already shown that he's got the full use for whatever cutting he does. And I really think if there's going to be a bounce back year, this is the year. If anything, I have him either as a must-have or a sleeper. But that's me. I didn't have this.
I don't know how you can have him as a sleeper if he's averaging going around 15 in the draft. Is that really a sleeper? Like if he comes back into form from 3 years ago, then people
is it sleeper?
Been taking him 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think right now he's being drafted after Leonard Fournette and DeAndre Swift. So I think both of those guys are going to end up worse off than Saquon Barkley. Whether or not Barkley's going to do better than someone like Mixon or, that's when you start getting into, where's the right place to draft them. I do believe that Saquon Barkley will be a top 10 running back this year.
You have Barkley over Fournette? That might be
yes, I do. Especially
I will. I'm not home to put it on the board, but I will say
put it on the board.
I will say worse than 10 running back. Now we got to count injuries and everything else in there. It's not like
100%.
Because
100%.
Injuries.
I agree.
He's injury prone.
Yes. And so is Dalvin Cook, and he's going to be in the top 10 too. But whatever.
Hey.
That's fine. Okay. So let's move on to Philly, right? Must have is somebody we've never seen in a Philadelphia Eagles jersey before, and that is
AJ Brown.
That's right. And right now, he can actually be found in the 4th round.
It's crazy.
He's drafted as high as the 2nd round and as low as the 7th round. For me, he's my wide receiver 13, and it's really hard to believe that Brown has had 185 receptions, close to 3,000 yards, and 24 touchdowns in 3 seasons. And that's playing in a system that handed off the ball to Derrick Henry every play. And Philly gave him $100 million extension. Expect him to be a target monster. The only downside is that he's on a team that actually in the last year had less passing volume than the Titans did where he was.
Right.
So, that was very low. But that was a different system. That was, they didn't have as many receivers. I think AJ Brown's your must-have. I have him as wide receiver 13. My bust and sleeper kind of go together. So I'm going to do bust first, and that's Miles Sanders. And Brad, I know you have a bad taste in your mouth for Miles Sanders. A lot of people do. A lot of people in fantasy do, and I have him as a bust. Now, I know Philly is in a running back by committee, and they're actually not just running back by committee, but one of the worst running back by committees. And he led Philadelphia running backs with just 38% of the offensive snaps. So when your lead running back, the one who had the most carries, only gets 38% of the snaps, there's a problem. He had 137 carries. That's only 2 less than Jalen Hurts. Okay. He had 784 yards, which is only 30 less than Hurts, and he didn't score a touchdown. And think about that. It's hard to touch the ball 163 times in a season and never get into the end zone. He's currently RB31.
That sounds like Keith.
He's currently RB31, meaning he's going to be either a running back 3 or a flex. Stay away, even at that.
It's literally the Baltimore Ravens running back situation. Same thing.
Almost, yeah.
With running back. Yeah.
Right. So that brings me to my sleeper, and that's Kenneth Gainwell. Right now, he's RB47, meaning he's 4th or 5th RB on a given team.
Yep.
And despite the fact that I just said he's part of a 4-headed running back by committee, he received at least 5 targets in 5 games, and despite being just what people have thought about as a pass catching back, he actually received double-digit carries 3 times throughout the season. So and that was his rookie season. So he could become even more involved in the run game. The Eagles, they didn't sign Jordan Howard, right? So that right now is now looking at a 3-headed RBBC. And Gainwell's really the only running back under contract beyond 2022. So they're going to really want to see what they have. So I think you're going to see a pass-heavy Eagles team, right? That's what we talked about with A.J. Brown. Now you have that pass-catching back in Gainwell. So let's see. Let's see what happens with that. But he's my sleeper. Keith, we're now going to talk about the Commanders / Washington football team. What do you got? I mean, is there anybody that is so compelling that we want to have on our rosters?
I mean, first of all, they went from having the best name in the NFL to the worst name in the NFL. I love the Washington football team and smash that marketing team for the Commanders. This is interesting. Why
would they change that? That's the bust right there is their name.
I know. That's the bust. That's the sleeper because I named it for the sleep. It is so goofy. I love Scary Terry. And this is a guy that had a variety of quarterbacks throwing him the ball over the last 3 seasons. He's interesting. He has currently I think he's the 16th receiver or 17th receiver off the board, number 43 overall. But to me, this is a guy that's a must-have. I love his numbers as I'm about to pull them up. He puts up. I mean, he's pretty consistent. Last year, 77 grabs on 130 targets, so he gets the majority of them. Played a full season in 3 seasons. The guy's only missed 3 games. But 130 targets, 77 grabs, 1,053 and 5 touchdowns. Year before that, 87 receptions, 1,118 yards with a variety of quarterbacks throwing the ball. Listen, Carson Wentz isn't phenomenal, although he's a lot steadier than people give credit for. And he's going to find Terry early and often, and he's going to get the ball better than he's been getting it from other quarterbacks, if you ask me. So I really
if they can protect him.
Yes, exactly.
Well, yeah.
Exactly. So he is my must-have. Now it's interesting. I was having a hard time finding a bust, but if we're going to find a bust, I'm going to go with it because of the name. Ironically, I was just talking about it, but based on if he's taken as a QB1, I'm putting Carson Wentz as a bust. He didn't do bad. I'll tell you why I have him as a bust, because he's being taken. His ADP is 183. I know it's not a bad value, but I think some people will look at his numbers. I mean, first of all, he didn't have a terrible QBR last year. It was 94.6, put up 3,500, almost 3,600 yards, 2,700 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. So people were thinking, you know what? I can wait on a quarterback. He's going to go to Washington. He had Pittman. He had a banged up T.Y. Hilton. You might be thinking he's got McLaurin there. He's got Samuel. Again, I felt it hard to find a bust here. I do like Gibson, so I'm listing him because I don't think he's going to be a QB1. And people might look at that name and in his new situation and list him as that. So I'm for that reason, I'm listing him as a bust.
I get it, and I agree. I think there are two other things just to mention very quickly.
Sure.
Logan Thomas, who ended up on the PUP, who came off of a couple of good years and people had expectations. Right now he's tight end 21. I'm not going to say he's a bust, because if you get your 21st tight end, you expect him to be a bust. I'm just saying if there are expectations that you're going to get the old Logan Thomas, you're not. And the same thing with the defense, right? Washington's defense was in a top 5 position last year going into last year's draft. Everybody had expectations, and they turned out to be one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and they really didn't do a lot to solidify that. So I would stay away from the Washington defense as well. All right, go ahead, Keith. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's funny because I was also a little tough on the sleeper, because honestly, I really liked Logan Thomas, but he is on the PUP, so it's unknown what's going to happen with him.
Right. He could be a sleeper because of how low he's being drafted.
Exactly, and that's kind of the thing here. But my sleeper, just because I think because he was nearly considered a bust last year, is probably going to be Antonio Gibson. The guy, even in a season where he had a down year for him, all the hype coming in, everyone was saying this guy's going to be like a top 5 running back. He still put up 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, and he still had 42 receptions with another 294 yards and another 3 touchdowns. This is not a bad year. So people are down on him based on where.
But if you're watching them all season, it's like, where was that? It seemed like he was getting 35 yards a game.
Right, and that's what's so interesting. But he's being drafted as on average and as RB19 as the ECR, his best as RB10, but consensus, he's number 20 running back overall, number 36. So, I mean, I think that's crazy to me. So, if Logan Thomas wasn't injured, I would have had him as my sleeper. But based on the drop-off for Gibson, because of his numbers last year, which weren't that bad, I think this guy's going to come out, as long as he stays healthy, plays hard, and I think he can really outperform where he's being drafted.
Yeah, I shaking my head, honestly, about what's happened with Gibson. And, we look at fantasy points, and sometimes you think the players at the end of the season, you have X amount of points, so they must be doing great. Well, if they're not performing per game and getting enough points per game, then what good are they? So what if they have 6 every game? But in Gibson's defense, the guy was putting up some really good numbers. Yeah, there were some stinkers in there, but you throw out your 2 worst and your 2 best, you still have a very solid year. And right now, I mean, listen to this list. I have a bunch here. This one's actually from PFF, right? These are the running backs they have above Gibson in the draft. J.K. Dobbins, Brees Hall, David Montgomery, Ezekiel Elliott, Cam Akers, Travis Etienne, possibly suspended Alvin Kamara, Elijah Mitchell. All these people are above Gibson. And I'm telling you, except for maybe one or two of those, I'm taking Gibson ahead of them.
Exactly. I think a lot of the frustration last year was J.D. McKissick. He just ate into his playing time so much, and every time you turn on TV, and it's third and whatever, or second whatever, you see McKissick. But he actually had a good year as well. But like we just said, Commish, you look back at Gibson's numbers, you're like, holy shit, this guy had a decent year.
Absolutely.
I think it was just frustrating because of what could have been with him. So it made it that much more frustrating if you had him.
Yeah. All right. So we're done with the Washington football team, aka Commanders. Brad, now we're going to move out of the NFC East and we're going to head to the South, to the deep South, the NFC South, and we're going to talk about Atlanta. I know there's not a lot going on in Atlanta. I know it's going to be hard pressed to find a sleeper or a must have, but
bust.
What do you have?
Bust.
No, there's plenty of bust.
So, okay. So must have, we'll just go right to the must have. We all know who this is. Kyle is Pitts, right? He's a tight end there. He'll probably get 50% of the targets this year. Who knows? I mean, the guy's a beast. We know he's good. They pick up Marcus Mariota. Mariota can move around the pocket. Pitts is a big target. He's going to get the ball, right? That we know. So that we have. Okay. Now, I'm going back and forth. It's like every single other player on this team, every single one could be a sleeper or a bust. But they can't really be busts because of where they're getting drafted. There's nobody out there getting drafted. Cordell Patterson, who had a huge year last year. He's 31 years old now. Through weeks 1 through 14, this guy had a monstrous year. And then he fell off and he couldn't, he couldn't even hit 9 points in fantasy after that for the last 4 games.
Yeah.
Right before that, he was a beast. I mean, he made people's year last year until the end. And if they got to the playoffs with him, they had to find someone else because he fell apart. But he's the number 36 running back right now on people's lists. Right?
Yeah.
If you pick him up and he gets 15 points a game, that's not a bust. That's a sleeper.
That's a sleeper, right?
But so I didn't know where to put him. But my potential sleeper is Bryan Edwards. He gets traded from the Raiders to Atlanta. Atlanta doesn't have anybody else. All right. Edwards did have 59 targets last year. He had almost 600 yards. He was in an offense that had Waller and all these guys,
Renfro
and picking up all these receptions. So he kind of was the lost man there. But in Atlanta, he's really the lead wide receiver. So, and right now he's the number 87 wide receiver, on draft lists, range. Let's say it's 85 to 90. So you can get him probably as a free agent, let alone anything else.
Right.
And you just don't know, right? I mean, even in Houston, the wide receiver in Houston. What's that?
Brandon Cooks?
Yeah, Cooks on an awful team had a really good year. So could he be that kind of player this year?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're behind. They're throwing. It's going to be Pitts and Edwards. So he's my sleeper for Atlanta. There really are no busts because no one's getting drafted, in the top 4 rounds on that team.
So the bust, in a sense, is just stay away from everybody else.
Pretty much.
Okay. That's fair. All right. So now we'll move on to Carolina. The must-have is easy. It's Christian McCaffrey. He's one of the best running backs in recent NFL history, one of the best in fantasy football history already, even though he hasn't played a lot. The bigger question, I guess, is when do you draft him? If you were going to draft McCaffrey right now, guys, where would you have him?
What are they saying? I mean, how is he? Is he healed? Is he looking?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said he came out and said yesterday or today that he feels better than he ever has. Now, of course, he's going to say that, but he came out and said that. Of course, he's only played 10 games in the last 2 years, so he should feel good.
I'm right now, I would not take McCaffrey in the first round.
Okay, what about you, Brad?
I'm probably taking McCaffrey. Like, if I have the number 3 pick,
right,
and he's there, I don't know how I don't take him.
Right.
Take every bit of my being not to McCaffrey there.
Look, well, right now he's currently RB number 2. And, some people grabbing him before Taylor, actually at number 1, and some as low as 11, which corresponds with what Keith's saying. I'm not touching him in the first round because he gets hurt a lot, right? In 2020, he had the high ankle sprain. Then he had the right shoulder sprain. And then in December of 2020, he had the thigh strain. And then in 21, in September, he had a hamstring strain. In November, an ankle sprain. However, all of that aside, according to Pro Football Docs, one of the premier sites for determining whether or not players are healthy, the injuries are not evidence of a pattern, and they're not really considered long-term or likely to linger. This organization, Pro Football Docs, is made up of physicians, orthopedic doctors, who review all the information about each of these players, and whatever is public, they review and they determine based on the type of injury, when they think they could return, or how healthy they are. They list McCaffrey actually near the top of their list of players who were injured that are healthy now. And if he can stay healthy, he's going to be one of the top, if not the top, running back in fantasy this year. Sleeper is.
Do you think?
Yeah. Do I think what?
Commish. With what quarterback?
I lost you. I don't know if you're saying does it matter what quarterback he has. I don't think the answer is yes. I mean, I don't think the answer is no. I think it doesn't really matter what quarterback, because he's got the skills. You are what? Kind of frozen there, Cyclop. Maybe go out and come back in, and I'll talk about my sleeper, and then we can always answer your question after that. So my sleeper right now, I guess, Pete, since you're the only one left, is Robbie Anderson. And he's either not being drafted or he's being drafted really late. And when he's drafted, he's being drafted as a wide receiver 6, meaning that there are 5 other wide receivers on people's team that they would rather have than Robbie Anderson. Look, he's current option in the Panthers wide receiver core heading into 2020. And with Baker Mayfield, even though he's not the best quarterback in the league, it is much better than Sam Darnold. Yeah. See the possibility of the return of 2020 Robbie Anderson, the guy who had over 1,000 yards.
It's amazing.
Again. And if McCaffrey stays healthy, look for Anderson to even do much better than his current ADP. And the bust, to me, again, it's kind of like what Brad said. Nobody else is really being drafted that high. I'm just going to suggest to stay away from the Carolina defense. They're actually one of the worst, if not the worst, defenses in football, which bodes well for what I was saying with my sleeper with Robbie Anderson. Now, Brad, you had a question about McCaffrey or that offense?
Some connection issues there for a minute. I'm not sure who it was, but you were up on me. But anyway, with McCaffrey, are you frozen up again? I think you're frozen again.
No?
Where's everybody? 20. Can you guys hear me?
We hear you.
I think you're freezing there, B.
You guys are frozen up. 2020, you there?
Yeah, we're here.
We're here. All right. So let's
freezing, I'm not sure.
All right, I'm taking Brad off again until we get that fixed. In the meantime, Keith, you were going to be next with New Orleans anyway.
Right.
The Saints, God, that's without their coach, without Drew Brees. I mean, that team could be messed up if tomorrow, right?
I mean, this was I thought I had trouble with Chicago and doing it. This was really hard sleeper must and bust with this team. And then they're going from one of the best genius offensive minds in the NFL to Dennis Allen, who is a defensive coach that's taken over. And you're hoping that he's going to take several pages out of Sean Payton's playbook, because this is one of the biggest guessing games right now. So this was really, really tough. But it's going to be interesting. My must-have is actually, believe it or not, Mark Ingram. Because when you look at what's going on with Alvin Kamara, right? I mean, this is a tenuous situation at best. We don't know how long he's going to be out. They got Ingram back. Other than Ingram, it's Tony Jones. And was it Darrell Williams? Is that what it was?
Although that could be a sleeper, but we'll talk about that. Go ahead.
It wasn't my sleeper, but Ingram still showed he's got a lot of tread left on his tires. He wasn't used, last year, and the year before that, he was in a really nice timeshare in Baltimore and looked pretty decent. So when you look at his numbers, I mean, look, he's not getting drafted very high. His ADP is 173, but again, we're talking about a team that is going to be very defensive and run heavy. And if you look at what his numbers are, which for some reason it's not pulling up for me here, they really weren't that bad. On the teams that he was on, when he was in Baltimore, he put up nice numbers. He really did. He's going to
Wait, hold on. You're saying he's a must-have?
No, he's a must. He's the must on this team right now.
Doesn't it matter what
Mark
happens
Ingram?
with Kamara?
Well, yeah, because isn't it looking pretty dubious for Kamara at this point?
Not necessarily, because I don't think his trial is until October. Either August or October. So we don't even know what's going to happen. The NFL hasn't stepped in and done anything prior to what the courts are doing.
So this is a very fluid issue. The bottom line is, regardless of it is completely reliant on what is going on with Kamara and what surfaces. And if it's a situation where he's going to get at least 8-10 games in knowingly, then of course he's going to be the must. But if not, it switches and pivots to me to Mark Ingram. Other than that, I'm having a very hard time finding musts on this team based on where they're being drafted, where their draft positions are, other than quite possibly their defense. But that would be my must. My bust, quite honestly, is Jarvis Landry. Now, again, he's not coming in at he's the 55 ranked number wide receiver overall, 131. And people might be looking at this and saying Thomas is going to end up on the pup for a very long time. They're nobody did anything last year. Marquez Callaway didn't do anything. Traquan Smith didn't do anything. They went out and got a fantastic rookie out of Ohio State, number 11 college draft pick in Olave Murray. So, I mean, we'll talk about him in a second. But people might be thinking Landry. Is this, Landry caught 100 balls 2-3 years in a row. Quite honestly, I don't think that's what you're going to get. Not to mention, that's not what Jameis Winston looks for. He doesn't go after those slot receivers. He likes to go down and deep. So, last year, Landry 52 grabs, 570 yards, 2 touchdowns. The year before that, 72 grabs, 840, 3 touchdowns. Not 10 touchdowns in 3 seasons. I'm not excited about Landry. People might be looking at that name. It's not a bad ADP. I just don't see him doing much. But my sleeper is going to be the rookie. I was going back and forth with Winston, but oh my God, he was putting up less than 200 yards a game last year. But he's also
he had some really good games.
He had a good QBR. He's going to be a decent NFL quarterback. This is a defensive-minded team, defensive-minded coach that's going to want to grind it out. I don't see big numbers for Winston this year. And he's being drafted as RB22, so I couldn't call him a sleeper. But I think the kid, Olave Murray, is going to look really interesting. God, the kid's numbers were insane out of Ohio State. I mean, he had, I think, 2,700 yards receiving, a lot of touchdowns. There was 35 touchdowns. He's been working with Michael Thomas. Remember, Michael Thomas came on as a rookie. I think almost had 100 catches. So this is, I think, the kind of receiver that Jameis Winston's going to go after. He's it's an unknown quantity, so I think he's someone that can be had. He might, who knows where he's going to be drafted with what's going on, but I like him as a sleeper this year.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, Brad.
I just got to say, I think you may have jumped a shark with saying that Mark Ingram is the must-have for this team.
Well,
what Mark is saying is that if Kamara is not,
Kamara is out,
Mark Ingram is a must-have, and I don't have a problem. I'm high on Ingram if Kamara is out.
How old is Ingram? How old is Ingram? 34?
50, 53?
No, 30, 31. But you know something? He's a strong back. He's a one-cut north-south runner. That's going to get all the – Jameis Winston is not a running quarterback. He's going to get all the goal line carries. And if Kamara's not there, it is Marky Mark. It's Tony Jones and Darrell Williams. It is going to be – I see Mark Ingram getting 15, 18 totes a game and being a little involved – in the receiving game. Who else?
I think Darrell Williams would move ahead of Ingram in that.
No, I don't see that. I don't see it. Not with the history.
I think we have to wait and see. And Brad, I don't disagree that that's a good possibility based on how well he did in Kansas City last year. And I think we're going to see in preseason what happens in that, with regard to Ingram and Williams. Keep in mind,
he's fourth on the depth chart right now. Darrell Williams.
These just guesses, right? Right now, the depth charts are guesses, but based on the fact that they paid him the money. Look, Kamara he averaged when he did play, he averaged 20 carries a game, right? Yeah. Those carries have to go somewhere. Now, it might end up being a running back by committee if Kamara's not there. It's very possible that both Williams and Ingram, but I have a feeling they're going to go with the hot hand. And if Williams shows, whether it's practice, preseason, beginning of the year, that he's the better or the more productive running back, then they're going to stick with him and forget what Ingram's doing. But I think, and Keith did have a disclaimer that it's a very fluid situation. Right now, I wouldn't touch anybody in New Orleans until I know, is Kamara playing? Is Michael Thomas back? And until we know the answers to those, it would be tough to touch.
No, agreed. I think the better scenario there, not the better scenario, but the scenario might be you might see Ingram as the third down back there because of protection.
As a third down back. I think Tony Jones would be the third down back because he can run out of the backfield.
Look, we can guess all day. Darrell Williams was third down back in Kansas City before CEH got hurt. So
that's true.
You just don't know. So let's since New Orleans is a mess, let's move on to a team that is not a mess, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Brad, there's a lot of people on that team that are must-haves, that are sleepers, and possible busts.
So, of course, there's news coming out of Tampa Bay today with the signing of Julio Jones to go with his old teammate, Russell Gage. They have all the Atlanta receivers, and Atlanta has none. So, I don't know. I mean, I think that's insurance that they're picking him up because of, with Godwin, although Godwin did not go onto the PUP list. They released today. So I think it's just insurance. And hey, they'll get players like that because these guys want to go to a winner. And, he's getting Tom Brady thrown in the ball. And he can be out there as the fourth receiver, Julio Jones. Right, so he'll just be running around the field free for Brady to throw.
Well, he could end up being in that third wide receiver in the Antonio Brown role that they had last year, which was very productive. It is possible.
I think that's more the Russell Gage fit, but okay. So here we go. The must-have, and the guy's 45 years old, is Tom Brady. I stopped saying to put Tom Brady on your team 10 years ago. And every year he just, he's 35. He's over the hill. He's not going to do well. So I wouldn't draft him. And I wouldn't draft him. No, I've never had him on my team. No, that's not true. I had him on a team last year.
Yeah.
We had him on the team last year. At 44 years old, he was the best quarterback out there for a long time. So he's your must-have. He's got weapons there. He's got people to throw to. So he's the must-have. My sleeper is Russell Gage. He's coming into an offense. Again, we were just talking about it. Godwin is coming off of an injury, so he may not even play the first 4 to 5 weeks. Gage, as a sleeper, he's the number 46 wide receiver being taken right now in that range, right? But he's really right now slotted as the number 2 wide receiver on that team, with Godwin out, and or the number 3 if and when Godwin comes back. And I think that's solid, especially on a team that throws that much, right? We know that. So Russell Gage is my sleeper. He's going to be probably getting 6 to 10 catches a week range, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brady throws it 45 times a game. And so they got to go somewhere, right? Like we said. So he's a guy that I like there. Sleeper. As a bust, I'm going with Cameron Brate. Okay, obviously
Gronk is no longer there.
Gronk retired again, right? He said he's not coming back. So what do? They go out and they have Cameron Brate, who's a good tight end. Very, very solid, but they go out and get Rudolph. So now does Rudolph kind of fill that Gronk type, tight end? I think he does better than Brate. And I think he's a bigger target that Brady likes.
He's your red zone target.
Right. Well, yeah, which makes Brady value go way down, obviously. Yep. So he is my bust, right? Everyone thought, he's going to move up because of that, and he's going to be the guy. And then boom, they get Rudolph, and that kind of cuts his value in half, probably.
How terrible is that division? With Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans, Tampa Bay just has to show up, right? They could start their third stringers and probably beat these teams.
Brady will probably be playing like 2.5 quarters a game.
As we're putting this list together, I'm looking at the NFC, and yes, I know they won the Super Bowl last year, but there are some poor teams in the NFC, and I know the AFC is not great, and we got the Jaguars and everything, but I just, the NFC just looks so weak this coming year, and that leads me to the NFC North with Chicago, and I'll try to make this quick because there's not a lot to talk about. On the must-have, to be honest, there's really only 2 Bears that I would consider taking, and I don't even know if you call them must-haves, but the 2 Bears are Montgomery and Mooney, right? But the reason I'm going to say Montgomery is my must-have is because the lack of teams that actually don't have a running back by committee system. And yes, I know Khalil Herbert is there, but it's clear that Monty is the back. And when he was hurt and Herbert came in and he looked good, and everyone thought that when Monty came back, it would turn into a running back by committee. It didn't. He actually averaged 20 carries per game in weeks 15 through 18. And though he didn't gain a lot of yards, he did average over 16 fantasy points per game in those last 5 games. So you need a running back 1 or a running back 2 at running back 3 prices. Monty's your guy. He really is going low. He could have been a sleeper because of that, but I have him actually as a must-have.
On that team, right?
What?
He's the must-have because there's not a lot else.
There's not a lot else, but to be honest with you, like I said, he's going as an RB3 in mini drafts. I think he could easily be on the cusp of a 1 or 2.
Late 1, early 2. I think for sure.
So my sleeper then is Cole Kmet, and that's everyone's talking about Cole Kmet now. He's the tight end 15. Last year he doubled his target total with over 600 yards. He took over that lead role from Jimmy Graham. And if Justin Fields plays well, like the Bears hope he does, then Kmet's really going to be his number 2 target after Mooney. But that leads me to my bust, and that's Justin Fields. I didn't like him coming out of college. I don't like him now. Some people actually have him as a sleeper. And the narrative, this is what people are saying. If you go to a fantasy football website and they talk about Fields, they'll say, hey, despite the fact that he only played in 12 games, he ranked 5th among QBs in rushing yards. Great. He led the league with 9.8 average depth of throw. I mean, when you start getting into some of these statistics that really don't matter when it comes to fantasy football, you know there's a problem. He played in 11 games. He only had more than 15 points once in those 11 games. Never threw for more than 300 yards. And although he's being drafted as a QB 17, I do not expect him to be in the top 20 of quarterbacks. So I would stay away from Justin Fields. I could be 100% wrong. I don't think they have the support system there. They don't have the line. I think that Chicago's a mess, and the quarterback's going to be part of that mess.
Agreed. And I wanted to correct one thing from earlier. Daniel Jones is the number 22-23 QB being taken right now, not 17. I made a mistake when I had looked at it, and that makes him even more of it. That even makes him more of a sleeper.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, I don't think you can really go wrong with Daniel Jones as your backup quarterback, especially if you end up having a Tom Brady. You have somebody like that where you know for the most part you're going to start him every week unless it's a bye week, and then the bye week comes. You're going to be okay with Daniel Jones. Now, can you rely on Daniel Jones to be that week in, week out guy? Not yet, right? We haven't seen anything that would show that, right? But yeah, I agree, Brad. He could end up having much higher stats. Keith, welcome back. Detroit. Yeah. We're going to talk about Detroit.
No, this was tough. It was really tough to go must bust in sleeper here because looking at everything, I really kind of feel like everyone really is in deserving. That's what really deserves. But my must here, it's got to be DeAndre Swift. He's such a beast. In 2020, he really wasn't. My must, no, he's my must. I really like. They started using him a little more correctly. I know they love Jamal Williams there as well, but the guy only played 13 games, put up some nice yardage, 617 yards, 5 touchdowns, average 4 yards a carry. But I love the receptions, 62 receptions. That's like a wide receiver 3 or 4 with another 452 yards and 2 touchdowns. The question mark with Swift always is health. Played 13 games last year, only played 13 games in 2020. But if there is a must-have, and I know I wanted to say Amon-Ra St. Brown, but he's my sleeper. He's not my must-have because based on draft positioning, he is my sleeper, not my must-have. He was my must-have. But again, we're looking at ADP and where I think things are going to go. And, you have DJ Chark coming over. So people might look at that and say, is that possibly going to eat into St. Brown? So Swift is my must. My sleeper is Amon-Ra St. Brown. I absolutely, positively have a man crush on this guy. He was unbelievable last year with a average to below average quarterback throwing in the ball. Came on the scene this rookie season, and this is a guy, he's being drafted as the number 20 wide receiver, which is why I like him for a sleeper versus a must-have. He was one of the top 10 wide receivers fantasy-wise towards the back half of the season last year, and this was when he had a quarterback that couldn't find himself till the 9th or 10th game. It was so bad. But in his rookie season, these are Michael Thomas somewhat-esque numbers. 90 grabs, 912 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Again, with a slumping, sulking quarterback throwing him the ball for the majority of the first half of the season. So that's why I like Amon-Ra as my sleeper, not my must-have. Now, my bust,
wait, Keith, does Elijah Mitchell know you have a man crush on Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I was wondering.
You're calling it out. Now he's going to watch the show. I mean, you can't draft. Stop. What are you doing?
Sorry, I know.
And the other question, and his other man crush retired today.
Oh, Danny Amendola?
Chris Carson.
Oh, yes. Actually, I'm very happy about that. I have Penny in a keeper league, and I love that for like a 60.
Too bad Penny's not going to be the starting running back. But okay, so let's keep going. Who's your bust?
This was really tough on the bust because it's not Jared Goff. Because Goff is being drafted as a 26th quarterback, so that's where he should be. He's being drafted at the right position. So, and my bust, believe it or not, is T.J. Hawkinson. This guy for the last couple of years keeps coming in as this big tight end. I saw him last year after Kittle, Kelsey, Andrews, Waller being that like fourth or fifth wide receiver. Now his ADP is suggesting that it might be right. He's going as the seventh tight end off the board overall, number 61, and that could be the case. His numbers weren't horrific. 61 grabs, 580 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He 2 out of his 3 seasons, he doesn't stay healthy, but those numbers are pedestrian. That's like 50 yards a game. He's getting a touchdown every second or third game. Honestly, for where he's being drafted, I'd rather have Schultz, maybe Gesicki, even Freiermuth looked very good last year. For where he's being drafted, Hawkinson is my bust.
He didn't play 5 or 6 games last year.
No, he didn't play 5 games last year. But even so, he was averaging 40, 50 yards a game and a touchdown every third game. Numbers. Right. Not great. He looked, he was definitely a target. But where he's being drafted and that name, everyone thinks Hawkinson. He's one of the elites. Yeah. He's right under the Kittle, Kelsey's, Waller, Andrews. I don't think so. He's good, but I'd rather, like I said, I'd rather have a Schultz. Maybe a healthy Logan Thomas, like even Freiermuth. Great example. Brady loves the tight end with Gronk on. So I just think it's a bust based on his that name, Hawkinson.
So I just want to say one thing about Swift real quick. And I understand where you're going with the pass catches, and that's great, and that's fine. But you need to understand, and everybody needs to understand, that 50% of DeAndre Swift's rushing came in 2 games. So for all those games he played, only 2 of them made up half of the yardage that he got for the rest of the season. Right. So really, you just got to be careful. I understand he's a must-have. I'm not saying he's not. I understand why you said that or why you did that. And where Swift is being drafted, I'm kind of okay with that. I'm just saying there's got to be an asterisk, a caveat. You just got to be careful.
And I think this is his 3rd year. I think they're going to start using him more correctly. He's a very potent running back, and I think they're going to realize that. But again, it was a tough situation based on where I think everyone's ADP was stacked really accurately with the Browns, with the exception of Hawkinson. Yep, I agree with you. Swift is. I had him last year, so I saw what happened, but I just think they're going to use him differently this year.
Okay. All right. So let's now talk about Green Bay. And I don't know if Javi is still listening. And Brad, I don't know. You said before you weren't sure whether or not you had done Green Bay.
Yeah. So when I looked, I did Minnesota instead of Green Bay. I missed it by 1 for some reason when I looked, but that's okay. I did it while we're here. I didn't do a lot of stats or anything, but I have my players. All right. So the interesting thing is here with Rodgers obviously is the must-have on this team, right?
Yep.
He's an all-star. He's an all-pro quarterback. All of those things, we know that. And he showed up at training camp dressed as Cameron Poe today. I don't know if you saw that.
No.
It looked just like him. the tank, the whole thing. I saw a picture of that. So the interesting thing about it is, are his receivers going to be good enough to get him to where he needs to be that must-have and to be one of those top quarterbacks in the league this year? And we'll find out, right? Which brings me to my sleeper. Now, I know they have Lazard, blah, 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 Randall Cobb, old, right? The one guy that right now is my sleeper on that team is Sammy Watkins. And I know he's injury prone, and I know all of these things, but at the number 99 wide receiver taken in that position means he's a free agent, or you could get him with the last pick of your draft. I think has the best potential to way, way, way outdo his number, because he's going to be on the field in this offense if he can stay healthy. Obviously a huge question, but if he is, there will be plenty of targets coming his way because he's got good hands, he's got good speed, he can get open on the field, and will give Rodgers that target to go to. That's my opinion on the sleeper. Okay. Bust, I'm going to go with Javi on this, is Aaron Jones. Okay, I agree with Javi on this, and when he was talking about it, I've been thinking about this for a while. I think A.J. Dillon will take over that backfield. It started last year. You saw it happening. And I just don't see that changing much this year. Dillon, that guy's a beast. And he can run over people. He can run around people. I think you will start to see him take over that backfield. So Aaron Jones it's hard to say Aaron Jones is a bust. I mean, he's being taken as people's number one running back right now. Still, I think around number 12, I think.
Yeah. Look, I think we're also going to see a fluidity that we were talking about with New Orleans with what's going to happen in Green Bay without Devontae Adams,
right?
And how that's going to change things, because I think we're going to see a lot of formations where you're going to see both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon on the field at the same time.
That's certainly possible.
And that dynamic is going to be new for the most part, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. So I'm not saying I disagree. I can't disagree because I don't know for sure. Am I staying away from Aaron Jones? Possibly as a flex if I can get him at a running back 3, without a lot of capital. I have no problem with that.
But you're not going to get him there.
I understand that. That's why, right? That's why he's a bust. I get it. I completely understand. All right. Well, good, quick work doing that quickly while we were working everything else. So let's move on to Minnesota. I know you did it, so let me. If you have anything you want to add to what I'm saying, please do.
I'm curious what yours. I'm curious what yours are, and I'll tell you what mine are.
So my must-have is an obvious pick. It's Justin Jefferson, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to go through stats. We don't need to go through stats. The only question is where you draft him. In non-PPR leagues, I have him as a wide receiver 3 after Cooper Kupp and Jamar Chase, and at the bottom of the first round. In PPR leagues, I have him actually number 4 after Taylor, McCaffrey, and Kupp. So I think everything changes based on the type of format, but the point is, in any format, you have to have Justin Jefferson on your team. It's just a matter of when you take him. My sleeper is actually Irv Smith Jr. Now, Irv Smith, yes, look, I could have chosen Kirk Cousins, who is going late in most formats, but that's too easy. Smith is actually being drafted outside of the top 10, meaning he's a tight end number 2 on most teams. But Minnesota at this point has no choice but to rely on Irv Smith. They don't have anybody else. It's not like he's competing for that position. He's healthy. He's going to have that starting position. Now, a lot of people may have forgotten about Irv Smith because he didn't play last season when he had that meniscus injury. So he had a whole season he didn't play. But if you all remember, the last 3 weeks of 2020 is when he went off. And if you were to take those 3 weeks, I know this is silly and I'm sorry for doing this, but if you were to take those 3 weeks and extrapolate them out to a full season, he had 62 catches, 680 yards, and 11 touchdowns. And if you're playing half PPR, that's 165 fantasy points, which would have put him as a tight end 4 overall after Mark Andrews, Kelsey, and Schultz. And again, I know that's silly because I'm taking 3 games and I'm spreading them out. But the point is, in that offense, with Thielen starting on his decline or continuing on his decline, having no competition, Irv Smith being healthy, I think he's your sleeper tight end. I think he will finish within the top 10. Now, my bust is actually a must-have for most people, and that's Dalvin Cook. He's never played more than 14 games in a season. Over the last 4 seasons, he's actually averaged 13 games a season. When he plays, the guy's magic to watch. The key with Cook is how many games can he actually play, right?
Right.
It's huge upside, but you could lose your first-round draft pick if history repeats itself. And it's not necessarily his past injuries that I'm worried about, because all of those injuries are things that have been healed. It's really just the fact that his running style, which is like through the trenches, force contact, he doesn't avoid contact, that makes him more prone to injury. So that's my fear with Dalvin Cook. That's why I have him as a bust. He's being drafted as an RB4. I'm not sure if I would take him. I had him the past 2 years. Not sure if I would do it again this year, just based on his injury history.
Yeah, I agree with all of those. I did have Cousins because I had Cousins as my sleeper. I did have Cook and I did have Jefferson.
I can see that.
And Cousins was my sleepers because he always gets looked past. He's always people's second quarterback, or he doesn't even get drafted depending on the league. And he always he's been putting up numbers. And sometimes he'll go through these little spans where he doesn't do much, and then he blows up. So it can be a little frustrating having him. But with that offense, and they have a new coach who likes to throw more on earlier downs, and that will pump his numbers up to that point where he's going to be a top 10 quarterback this year.
And he's got tons of weapons around him.
Yeah.
Lots of weapons. All right, let's try to get through the AFC West. I know we're running late here. Keith, Arizona, talk about a team that has completely changed in the past year.
It really has. I have a question for you guys. Can you tell me what running back had the second most rushing touchdowns in football last season?
Probably Connor, because he went off. The question is, and we talked about this with Mark Andrews about 3 years ago, where most of his fantasy points came from touchdowns, whether or not that's enough to support him the next year.
You know something? I'm going to tell you, most of his fantasy points did. I mean, yes, he did have 15 touchdowns, second to Jonathan Taylor's 18, but tied with Joe Mixon. But you know something? It wasn't all just touchdowns. The guy actually had a really decent season. Let me tell you why I like him. First of all, he's the RB16. Okay, overall number 34. I love the value there. Chase Edmonds gone. Drake's been gone for a couple of years. By the way, I remember the name Darrell Williams when I was doing my research. Darrell Williams is actually with the Cardinals, not with New Orleans. So I apologize. It was another running back that was like a Darrell Williams that was there. So it's basically him and Darrell Williams. But this is the guy. We know that. The guy, I mean, he played 15 games, was in a timeshare with Edmonds, but he still put up he had 1,000 yards from scrimmage. So it's not just, by the way, that was 15 rushing touchdowns, had another 3 in the air. So 1,000 yards from scrimmage total with 18 total touchdowns. He had, with being not the passing back, he still had 37 grabs. By the way, on 39 targets. Kyler Murray is very good at throwing that 2-3 yard pass. And again, another 3 touchdowns, another 375 in the air with Chase Edmonds. Bye-bye. So I love James Conner for the value as an RB16. And to me, as a must on this team, it is him. It is not Kyler Murray. Why? Kyler Murray is actually my bust. I had Kyler Murray last year. And for the first 4 games of the season, I was the happiest fantasy football owner there was. After that, he went David Copperfield on me and completely and utterly disappeared. Why is he a bust? He's being drafted as the number 5 overall quarterback. I honestly think at this point I can name 10 quarterbacks that right now I'd rather have over Kyler Murray. He did, again, like you love to talk about, Commish, the majority of his damage early on in the season only ended up with 37-87 in the air with 24 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. Not bad. The guy was like from an NFL standpoint, had a QBR of 100, nice quarterback rating. But the biggest concern with him, his rushing numbers dipped dramatically. They were cut in half. The year before, 2020, he had 820 yards on the ground. Last year, only 420 and change with over 50 less rushing attempts and only 5 rushing touchdowns. So he's trying to preserve his career. They're trying to preserve his career. And as the 5th-ranked quarterback, to me, this guy is a bust. As far as the sleepers, this was the hard one for me. And it's going to come down to injuries and suspensions, and I'm going with Hollywood Brown. I love him as the kind of receiver that Murray is going to look for. First of all, we got Hopkins suspended for it looks like a minimum 6 games. So we got AJ Green over there that's coming in as a receiver, and they've got Rondell Moore. They have who's the other wideout that no, it's not Jarvis Landry, but it's a guy in that vein. It was I wasn't loving the receivers that Murray was going to have to throw the ball to. So I love Hollywood Brown, who had 91 grabs last year on a very much of a run-first team. Jackson really started finding him 6 touchdowns and over 1,000 yards. With Hopkins hurt, an older AJ Green, I like Hollywood Brown, who did just 4 hours ago.
Hopkins is suspended.
Suspended 6 games, right? An aging AJ Green, and it's Hollywood Brown. And I saw like 4 hours ago he had some kind of little of a hamstring thing. I don't know if that's going to be anything. So
who? AJ Brown?
Yeah.
No,
Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown.
So barring that being anything,
he's on the non-football injury list, right? Hamstring,
something like that. But barring that, he's being drafted as the wide receiver 21. I think he might outperform that, playing that Hopkins role. Remember, this is a guy that just won for 90 and 1,000 the year before with the better throwing quarterback. So those are my 3 for Arizona.
Okay.
So real quick, New Orleans, other running back that all of us miss, Malcolm Brown.
Brown.
He just got signed today. Yeah, he just got signed today.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
All right, Brad. So do you want to talk about San Francisco?
I'll do San Francisco very quick. I know we're running long tonight. All right. Must have Deebo Samuel. This guy was a beast it's very, very obvious. Beast last year. They used him in running back and wide receiver. He should lots of touches this year wherever he gets them. My sleeper is Trey Sermon, because I don't know that Eli Mitchell. I know. What's that? I was hot on. I like this guy last year. I don't know that. I think he might get his opportunity this year. We'll see. I don't know. It was hard to find a sleeper on this team. They're kind of a mess right now with Trey Lance, and Trey Lance is my bust. They had a meeting today and they said, all right, we're basically done with you, Garoppolo. We're moving on to Trey Lance. It's official now. We all knew it, but now it's official. I don't know that Trey Lance is ready to take over this offense. We had a small sample size last year. He had 1 or 2 good passes, and everything else he looked awful.
Yeah.
So I don't know that he's ready. So he's my but no one's gonna draft him. Right? I'm taking Daniel Jones way before I take Trey Lance in a draft. They have some weapons. They have Ayuk, they have Samuel, they have Mitchell. If Mitchell can repeat, he got injured late last year. But if he doesn't, I think Trey Sermon gets his opportunity, because he came out, we all thought Sermon was going to be the guy last year, and then it ended up being Mitchell.
Yep.
And we'll see if he gets his opportunity. I don't know. I just couldn't really find the right people on that team.
Keith, are you texting Eli Mitchell right now to let him know that you're sorry for what we're saying?
Look away. Just look away.
Yeah, it's not my opinion. I promise me.
Look away. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams, and my bust is actually Cam Akers. And the reason is, look, everybody was on the Cam Akers train last year, especially you, Brad. Everybody was on the Cam Akers train before he tore his Achilles in the offseason. Yeah. And then he comes back, the train, everybody jumps back on the train, and the train quickly derails because Darrell Henderson actually came back from injury and outgained Cam Akers in the Super Bowl, even though Akers out-touched him. We're going to have a running back by committee here, folks, and they're probably going to split carries 50-50. I'm not really sure. That hasn't been stated as an objective, but based on how they were used in the Super Bowl and based on what we're seeing with both of them, if they're both healthy, I look for a running back by committee. Akers is being drafted way too high to be on a running back by committee. My must-have, I'll get to in a second. Let's talk about sleeper. My sleeper is actually Allen Robinson. He's currently being drafted as a wide receiver 16 in the 5th round. And part of that has to do with the fact that, talk about, going missing, David Copperfield, that was Allen Robinson last year. Yeah. But here's a guy, he made a name for himself as a really good wide receiver, despite the fact that he had Blake Bortles, Chad Henne, Mitch Trubisky. I'm not done. Chase Daniels, Nick Foles, Andy Dalton, and Justin Fields. These were his quarterbacks. And yet, even with that, he ended up where he had 2 seasons with over 100 catches, 1,200 yards, 6.5 touchdowns with those quarterbacks. So now what happens? You put him with a future Hall of Famer, possibly in Matt Stafford, throwing to him. So look, you combine all of that. You combine the talent with a quarterback, with a good system. I think Allen Robinson is being drafted way too low. Wide receiver 16 in the 5th round. I'm grabbing him in the 4th. My must-have, you might think, is Matt Stafford, but again, I think that's too easy. It's actually the Rams defense. And the reason I'm saying it's a must-have, a lot of people are overlooking the Rams defense because they weren't that great last year, right? They have Aaron Donald, so if you're, look, we had a lot of sacks, we had some fumbles, but overall, in fantasy and in the NFL, I think they were around 15. But yeah, and they lost Von Miller, right? But they bring in Bobby Wagner. They bring in a lot of depth in the with the cornerbacks and the draft. Look for them to rebound. I think they're going to be a top 5 defense this year in fantasy football, despite having the hardest schedule in the NFL. Keith, we're going to end with you with Seattle.
All right.
I know the Carson news is just devastating to you. But
it is. No, it's not devastating. I don't have to take him this year and watch him be on the injured list again. Absolutely awesome. But we
told you.
Yeah, I know it. It's just they love to run the ball, and the guy had the starting job there, which actually leads me to our must. We were just talking about it a second ago, but my must on this team is honestly, it's not DK Metcalf. It is in fact Rashad Penny.
No.
Yes. You said this last year when I picked him up and I was all excited about him. All he did 4 out of the last 5 weeks was the top 1, 2, or 3 running back in football. When he finally got in, this guy has so much tread on his tires. It's almost like it was his rookie season. What I like about it, he's being drafted as the 29th running back overall, number 88. What this guy did last year in just 10 games, right? That's a little more than half a season. 750 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns. And in weeks 4 through 5, 137 yards, 2 touchdowns, 135 a touchdown, 170 2 touchdowns, 190 and a touchdown, carries, 16 carries, 17 carries, 25 carries, and 23 carries. And I don't want to hear about Kenneth Walker. I know they like this guy. He's solidly sitting behind Rashad Penny. If you know anything about Pete Carroll, he likes to have ease rookie running backs, just like he did with Penny, into the fold, and he likes to lean on someone if they're good and they're healthy, as shown by Penny, who's an explosive running back, getting those 20 totes a game. So I think he's going to get those 20 carries a game. Walker's going to get his chances, but this is going to be, if he stays healthy, the Rashad Penny show, and I think he's going to be explosive. He really looked at last year in the games that he was in.
Wouldn't Penny then be your sleeper if he's the number 29 running back being drafted?
You would think so, but I'm trying to find a must, and it's believe it or not, it's not DK, because DK is actually my bust, and I'll tell you why. DK Metcalf was my bust for 2 reasons: Geno Smith and Drew Lockett. And if you look at where he's being drafted, he is the number 18 receiver overall off the board, number 44. And last year, with Russell Wilson throwing the ball and a full season behind him, he had 75 grabs, didn't bust 1,000 yards. 967. He did have the 12 touchdowns, but he would absolutely, positively disappear for games. But he's a bust because where he's being taken as the number 18 wide receiver. You know who my sleeper is? My sleeper is Tyler Lockett, who didn't have 75 grabs. He had 73, but he put up 1175 in yards, and he still had a nice 8 touchdowns and can be had not as the wide receiver 18, the wide receiver 33. Much cheaper. DK Metcalf is the elite, the premier, the marquee guy there. And with the unknowns of Drew Lock, Geno Smith, Lockett can be had for cheaper and is still a very effective wide receiver. But my must on this team is not DK. It is Rashad Penny. Carroll is committed to running the ball. He's going to be their guy. He showed he could be a workhorse when he's healthy. I love this kid.
Okay, so
I think Penny is 2020's new man crush. Officially.
Yes.
it is. He clearly is because he has him, and he's trying to hope that he does well. But the point is,
I watched what he did.
By the way, my concern about last year, and I know that he did incredibly well over those last 4 or 5 games or whatever it was his health. And that's always been my problem with Penny, is whether or not he can stay healthy.
Of course.
Which is why, even with at the time, they had Carson, who they knew had the neck injury and wasn't 100% healthy. They knew Penny was having problems staying healthy. So what do they do in the second round? They grab the Doak Campbell Award winner in college football for the best running back. They grab the running back who wins the Walter Camp Award for the best player in college football. They bring him in. I don't. You say he's solidly behind Penny. I know that's what you want to happen.
No, that's
I'm
what
not sure that until we see what he can do. I mean, let's remember what happened with the Colts with Edgerrin James when everyone thought he was going to be the backup, and then he just came in and he proved that there was no reason to have this guy sitting on the bench.
This is what's coming out of training camp. This is what's being said by the head coach.
Training camp hasn't even started. If you're talking about mini camp and you're talking about
You're talking about practice.
But this is what has been vocalized and illustrated by the coaching director. We'll see.
This is going to go on the board.
I think he has more points than Kenneth Walker.
Okay, that's fine. I'm good with that. But just as a fun fact, right, a little nugget before we leave, Walker actually has a NCAA record with 2 different football teams because he started with Wake Forest. He had the longest run from scrimmage. He had a 96-yard run against Rice when he was with Wake Forest. And then he transferred out of Wake Forest to Michigan State, and he had a 94-yard touchdown, which is against Rutgers, which is the longest in Michigan State history. So he actually has 2 of the longest runs. So I thought that was very interesting. Okay, take a breath. Let's all, Kenneth Walker, I understand he's not my man crush. I'm just, I'm not a big fan of Penny's inability to stay healthy. But
I think the bigger question is the under-over on when Penny gets hurt.
Right. All right.
Actually, we should hit him for Raheem Mostert, see who goes longer.
Does he make it through training camp?
Wait.
Camp.
Whoa. You're saying Raheem Mostert is going to be injured? Are you going against the Dolphin running?
I don't want it to think. Listen, his name is Raheem Mostert. What do you expect? But between Penny and Mostert, the question is which one is going to get injured first, and that's a great bet to pair against.
Okay, so we finished the AFC. We've now finished the NFC, and now what we're going to do is start getting into the actual positions and the tiers. Where do some of these people fall? And then we're not going to spend too much time on the first 2 rounds, right? It's really the other rounds, right? 3 through 7 that are going to make or break your team. So we'll emphasize a lot of that over the next few months, and we will have you all ready for the draft. Great night, guys. A lot of information given, a lot of information out there for people to take into consideration. Any final words?
No, we're getting to the nitty gritty where the games are going to start. The preseason is going to start. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be movement. All those things are happening. This is the most exciting time of the year. If you are an NFL fan, a fantasy player, this is the time.
Definitely, all the anticipation is there. It's like the foreplay of fantasy football.
All right, Javi, thanks for contributing. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we will see you